The stagecoach hit another rut, throwing Clara Wells hard against the wooden bench. She pressed a handkerchief to her nose, filtering the red dust that seeped through every crack, coating her traveling dress in a fine layer of southwestern grit. Through the window, the landscape of dry willow stretched endlessly, sagebrush and mesquite dotting the hardpan earth, heat waves dancing above distant mesas. "End of the line, miss," the driver called, his voice rough as the road they'd traveled. Clara gathered her carpetbag and stepped down, her Boston boots meeting the packed dirt of what passed for Main Street. The town looked exactly as she'd imagined: weathered storefronts, a saloon already noisy despite the early hour, and dust devils spinning lazily between buildings. The Pecan Inn stood across from the livery stable, its painted sign faded but legible. She touched the folded letter in her pocket. May Sullivan's enthusiastic scrawl, promising a perfectly suitable gentleman for a blind meeting. Clara had almost laughed at the notion back in Santa Fe, a former Boston schoolteacher agreeing to meet a stranger, but desperate times called for peculiar measures. The scandals she'd fled still echoed in her mind: the broken engagement, the banker's son's rage, the whispered accusations that had destroyed her reputation overnight. Inside the inn, the proprietress, a stern woman with steel-gray hair, barely glanced up. "Room's $2, baths extra." "I'm meeting someone," Clara said, adjusting the blue ribbon at her collar May's suggested signal. "A Mr. Carter." The woman's eyes sharpened with interest. "He ain't here yet. You can wait in the dining room." Clara chose a table by the window, ordering coffee that arrived black as tar and strong enough to strip paint. She sipped it slowly, watching the street. A freight wagon rumbled past, loaded with mining equipment. Two vaqueros argued good-naturedly over a horse trade. Normal life in a place where her past couldn't follow. The door creaked open. A man entered, tall and lean, dust clinging to his worn canvas pants and faded shirt. His hat shadowed his face, but she caught the flash of sharp eyes scanning the room. When he spotted her blue ribbon, he paused, then approached with the measured gait of someone who'd spent years in the saddle. "Miss Wells." His voice was low, careful. "Thorne Carter." He removed his hat, revealing weathered features that spoke of sun and wind. Dark hair touched with early silver at the temples. Not handsome in the classical sense her Boston circles would approve. But something in his bearing commanded attention. "Mr. Carter." She gestured to the opposite chair. "Please, sit." An awkward silence settled between them. Clara had conducted hundreds of social conversations in Boston drawing rooms, but here, faced with this quiet man who seemed more comfortable with horses than parlor talk, her usual phrases felt hollow. "May tells me you're new to teaching," he finally offered. "Recently arrived from back east, yes." She kept her tone neutral, revealing nothing of the circumstances. "And you may mentioned you work with livestock." "Something like that." His fingers wrapped around the coffee cup the waitress brought. "Run some cattle. Break horses when needed." They stumbled through the pleasantries, the weather dry, the town growing, the challenges of frontier life numerous. Clara found herself studying his hands, scarred and capable. Nothing like the soft palms of Boston gentlemen. When he caught her looking, she flushed and turned to the window. That's when the commotion started. A crowd gathered near the livery stable, voices rising in anger. Through the dusty glass, Clara saw men dragging someone into the street, a young man, barely out of boyhood, Mexican by his features, his hands bound. "Horse thief!" someone shouted. "Caught him red-handed." "String him up," another voice called, and the mob roared approval. Clara stood abruptly. They can't simply, there must be a trial, a judge. Thorne's hand caught her wrist. "Don't," he said quietly, but there was iron in his voice. "This isn't Boston. Different rules out here." "Rules?" She jerked free. "That's murder." She pushed through the door, Thorne right behind her. The crowd had thrown a rope over the barn beam. the makeshift noose already around the young man's neck. He was pleading in rapid Spanish, tears cutting tracks through the dust on his face. "Stop this!" Clara shouldered forward, her teacher's voice cutting through the noise. "You have no proof, no authority." A bearded man turned, his breath sour with whiskey. "Lady, you best step back. This ain't your concern." Justice is everyone's concern. She faced the mob, chin raised. "Where's your sheriff, your evidence?" "Evidence?" The bearded man spat tobacco juice. "Rodriguez here was found with Tom Morrison's mare. That's all the evidence we need." "I was bringing her back," the young man cried in accented English. "She wandered to our camp. I was bringing her back." "Convenient story," someone sneered. The crowd pressed closer, ugly murmurs rippling through their ranks. Clara felt the violence building like a thunderstorm, ready to break. She opened her mouth to argue further when Thorne stepped forward. He said nothing, just positioned himself beside her, thumbs hooked in his gun belt. Something in his stance made the nearest men step back. The bearded man's eyes narrowed, studying Thorne with sudden wariness. "Carter," he said slowly, "didn't recognize you under all that trail dust. Let the boy go. Jeb." Thorne's voice carried a quiet authority that surprised Clara. "If Morrison's mare wandered, that's on Morrison for hobbling her poor. You taking his side?" "I'm taking the side of doing things proper. We got law in this town, such as it is. Use it." For a tense moment, the crowd wavered. Clara saw hands drift toward pistol grips, saw the ugly calculation in their eyes. Then, from the back, someone muttered, "Hell, probably just another greaser mistake anyway." The spell broke. Men began dispersing, grumbling but moving. Jeb cut the rope binding Rodriguez's hands. "Get out of town, boy. Don't come back." The young man stumbled away, throwing one terrified glance over his shoulder. The crowd melted back to saloon and street corner, leaving Clara and Thorne standing in the dusty street. "That was..." She struggled for words. "Barbaric." "That was Tuesday in Dry Willow." He picked up his hat from where it had fallen. "Come on, let's get off the street." They walked back toward the inn in silence. Clara's hands shook with delayed reaction. She'd seen poverty in Boston, had witnessed cruelty, but nothing like that casual readiness for violence, that mob hunger for blood. "Would they have done it?" she asked. "Would they have hanged him?" Thorne's jaw tightened. "Yes." The simple word chilled her more than any elaboration could have. At the inn's door, she turned to face him. "Why did they listen to you?" Something flickered in his eyes, a guardedness she hadn't noticed before. "I've been here a while. They know me." But there was more to it. She sensed the way those men had looked at him, the careful distance they'd kept. Thorne Carter was more than just another ranch hand, whatever he claimed. "Thank you," she said, "for standing with me." A slight smile touched his weathered features. "Maid never forgive me if I let you get yourself shot on our first meeting." Despite everything, Clara found herself almost smiling back. Is that likely getting shot for speaking up? More likely than you'd think. He settled his hat back on his head. "This isn't an easy place. Miss Wells. It makes hard people, or it breaks them." "And which are you?" He studied her for a long moment, still figuring that out. He touched his hat brim in farewell and walked away, spurs chiming softly in the dust. Clara watched him go, this enigmatic man who broke horses and commanded respect from violent men, who spoke little but stood firm when it mattered. Inside, she found a letter waiting another teaching position, this one in California, safely distant from any hint of scandal. She could leave tomorrow, put this harsh town and its rough justice behind her, start fresh somewhere civilized. But as she climbed the stairs to her room, she found herself thinking of Thorne Carter's scarred hands and steady presence, of the young Mexican man who'd nearly died for possibly nothing more than returning a wandered horse, of May Sullivan's earnest hope in bringing two lonely souls together. Red dust had already settled into the folds of her traveling dress, marking her as surely as any brand. Perhaps it was already too late to leave Dry Willow unchanged. Perhaps some places, like some people, chose you rather than the other way around. That night, as coyotes called beyond the town limits and saloon music drifted through her window, Clara Wells sat at the rough wooden desk and penned 2 letters. The first declined the California position. The second, addressed to May Sullivan, contained just 3 words: "He'll do fine." Outside, the desert wind picked up, rattling shutters and sending more red dust swirling through the streets of Dry Willow, covering tracks and secrets alike in its endless, patient dance. The morning sun painted the desert in shades of gold and rust as Thorne arrived at the inn with 2 horses, a steady bay mare, and a paint gelding whose calm eyes spoke of good training. Clara stood on the porch, having traded her traveling dress for a more practical riding skirt she'd purchased from the general store. "Thought you might like to see some country," he said, handling the reins with easy competence. "Unless you'd rather stay in town. After yesterday's display of civic justice, I think I'll take my chances with the wilderness." A hint of approval flickered across his features. He helped her mount, his touch brief and businesslike, then swung up on his own horse with the fluid grace of a lifetime rider. They rode west, following a trail that wound between stands of cottonwood and mesquite. Thorne pointed out landmarks Widow's Peak, where a settler's wife had waited years for a husband who never returned. Devil's Backbone, a ridge of red rock that looked like a serpent frozen in stone. "You read the land like a book," Clara observed, watching him scan the horizon with practiced eyes. "I have to, out here. See those clouds?" He indicated wisps of white against the endless blue. "High and thin, moving fast. Means wind tonight, but no rain. But those," he pointed to a darker mass building to the south, "those are worth watching. Thunderheads. Could bring flash floods through the arroyos." "You sound like you've been caught in a few." "Once or twice." He guided his horse around a patch of prickly pear. "Lost some good cattle learning which washes to avoid." They stopped to rest the horses near a spring-fed pool, one of the precious water sources that made life possible in this harsh country. While the animals drank, Thorne unpacked simple provisions: jerky, hardtack, dried apples. "Not exactly Boston fare," he said, almost apologetically. "Boston fare comes with Boston company," Clara replied, accepting the food gratefully. "I'll take honest jerky over false pleasantries any day." They ate in companionable silence, watching a red-tailed hawk circle overhead. Clara found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't since fleeing east. There was something clean about this emptiness, this vast space where a person could breathe. "Why did you leave?" Thorne asked suddenly. "Boston, if you don't mind my asking." Clara considered her answer. "Let's say I discovered that reputation matters more than truth in certain circles. And you're clearly not from here originally." "Virginia, long time back, before the war." His expression closed off slightly. "Different life." She didn't press. Everyone in the territory seemed to be running from something past lives. Old griefs, mistakes that couldn't be undone. Perhaps that's what made the frontier bearable. All these broken people trying to build something new from the pieces. The ride back took them through the Mexican section of town. Adobe houses clustered around a small plaza. Children played in the dust, while women hung washing on lines stretched between buildings. The smell of cooking beans and chili drifted from open doorways. "There's to be a social at the church Saturday," Thorne said as they passed the modest chapel. "Dancing, if you're inclined." "Are you asking?" "I'm suggesting, though fair warning, I dance about as well as I make conversation." "Then we'll be well matched," Clara said, surprising a laugh from him. The church social drew most of Dry Willow's respectable citizens, such as they were. The sanctuary had been cleared of benches, and Chinese lanterns cast warm light over couples attempting various interpretations of the waltz. Clara wore her best remaining dress, a deep blue that had survived the journey relatively intact. Thorn appeared transformed in a clean white shirt and black vest, though he still moved like a man more comfortable on horseback than a dance floor. They managed a passable waltz, Clara leading subtly when he faltered, both of them laughing at their missteps. "Mr. Carter seems quite taken with you," a voice observed during a break between dances. Clara turned to find a striking woman in emerald silk, her bearing suggesting money and influence despite the frontier setting. Helena Fairchild, the banker's widow. May had whispered earlier the closest thing Dry Willow had to society. "Mrs. Fairchild," Clara acknowledged. "We're merely acquainted through mutual friends." Helena's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Interesting man? Carter, though one wonders if that's really his name. So many men out here seem to have forgotten what they were called back home." "I find the present more relevant than the past," Clara said carefully. "How refreshingly modern. Still, a woman alone should be careful. Some wolves dress remarkably well in sheep's clothing." Before Clara could respond, a commotion near the door drew everyone's attention. A group of men entered, led by someone who clearly didn't belong at a church social, where the local ranchers wore their best clothes awkwardly. This man's suit fit perfectly, his boots polished to a mirror's shine despite the dusty streets. "Silas Crow," Thorn said quietly at Clara's elbow, and she heard something dark in his tone. Crow moved through the crowd like a knife through butter, people stepping aside without quite knowing why. He had the look of a man who collected debts and didn't much care what currency he was paid in. "Ladies and gentlemen," Crow's voice carried easily over the music. "Forgive the interruption. Just wanted to remind folks about the new territorial water regulations. My office will be recording all claims starting Monday. Wouldn't want anyone to lose their access through simple paperwork oversights." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Water rights were life and death in the desert, and everyone knew it. "Seems straightforward enough." "Crow," an older rancher called out. "We file papers. Keep what's ours." "Certainly." Henderson, assuming, of course, that what you think is yours actually is. These new surveys are finding all sorts of discrepancies in the old Spanish grants and informal agreements. "You mean you're finding excuses to steal water?" Thorn said, his voice cutting through the diplomatic tension. The room went silent. Crow's gaze found Thorn, and his smile sharpened. "Mr. Carter, always direct. I admire that, though one might argue that bringing legal clarity to resource management is hardly stealing. One might argue a lot of things with enough lawyers." "Indeed. Perhaps we should discuss this privately. I understand you have some interests in water access yourself." "Nothing to discuss." "No, how refreshing. A man with no concerns about his future." Crow's gaze slid to Clara. "Or the future of those he cares about. Water's precious out here. Miss Wells," Clara supplied, lifting her chin. "Miss Wells, new to our community. I hear from back east." His smile was all teeth. "You'll learn quickly that survival in the territories requires understanding who your friends are and who they aren't." "Is that a threat, Mr. Crow?" Clara asked evenly. "Merely an observation about the realities of frontier life. Thorn here could tell you all about how fluid those realities can be." Thorn stepped forward slightly, and Clara saw several men tense, but Father Miguel, the elderly priest, chose that moment to intervene. "Senor Crow, surely such business can wait for weekdays. Tonight is for celebration." "Yes, of course. Padre, my apologies." Crow tipped his hat. "Enjoy your evening. Everyone, Miss Wells, Carter." He left as smoothly as he'd entered, but the mood had soured. Conversations resumed in lower tones, glances following Thorn and Clara as they moved to the punch bowl. "Charming fellow," Clara said. "He's worse than charming. He's smart." Thorne's jaw was tight. And connected. Railroad money. Political friends back east. He's been buying up water rights across 3 counties, forcing out anyone who won't sell. Through legal means. Legal as money can make them. Judge Harrigan's in his pocket. Half the territorial legislature, too. A man can die of thirst perfectly legally if the right papers get filed. Clara thought of the near lynching she'd witnessed, the casual violence that simmered beneath Dry Willow's surface. And when legal means fail, then accidents happen. Creek beds shift course overnight. Wells go bad. Fences get cut and cattle wander into places they shouldn't be. You sound like you've had experience. Thorne was quiet for a moment. My employer has had some run-ins with Crow. Nothing that can be proved, of course. Your employer, Clara repeated, remembering Helena's insinuations. The one you break horses for, among other things. He seemed to realize he'd said too much. Would you like some air? They stepped out into the courtyard, where the night had cooled considerably. Stars scattered across the sky like spilled silver, clearer than Clara had ever seen them. I should probably tell you, Thorne said slowly, that getting involved with me might not be wise. Crow wasn't making idle threats. Are you trying to scare me off? Maybe, yes. He faced her in the lantern light. You could still leave, take that teaching position in California or wherever. Find somewhere civilized, safe. I've had civilized, Clara said. I've had safe. They came with conditions I couldn't meet and lies I couldn't tell. Whatever else this place is, it's honest about its dangers. Is it? His smile was rueful. Even here, Miss Wells, not everyone is what they seem. Including you. Especially me. They stood in silence, the music from inside mixing with the distant howl of coyotes. Clara knew she should heed the warnings from Helena, from Crow, from Thorne himself. But something about this harsh place and its complicated people held her fast as any roots. I'm not leaving, she said finally. Not yet. Then God help us both, Thorne murmured, but he offered his arm to lead her back inside. As they rejoined the dance, Clara caught sight of their reflection in the window, a woman in borrowed finery and a man with too many secrets, trying to find grace in a land that offered little. Behind them, she could have sworn she saw another figure in the shadows, watching. The music played on, but the night's warnings echoed louder than any fiddle, promising that in Dry Willow, every dance might be the last. The storm built throughout the afternoon, dark clouds massing over the mountains like an army gathering for assault. Clara had been teaching the handful of children whose parents could spare them from chores, using the back room of the general store as a makeshift schoolhouse. Through the window, she watched the sky turn an ominous green-gray. That's enough for today, she told her students, noting how the horses tied outside had begun stamping nervously. Best get home before this breaks. The children scattered like quail, racing the wind that had begun to gust through town. Clara gathered her books, stepping outside just as the first fat raindrops spattered in the dust. Lightning flickered along the horizon, followed by a rumble that seemed to shake the earth itself. Miss Wells. Thorne appeared around the corner on horseback, leading her mare. Storm's coming fast. Too dangerous to make town. We need shelter. She didn't question his urgency, mounting quickly despite her skirts. They rode hard as the wind picked up, dust and debris swirling in miniature tornadoes. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in as many seconds. Where are we going? She shouted over the growing roar. A line shack up ahead, by the red rocks. The rain hit in earnest, just as they reached the small cabin tucked against a cliff face, built for cowboys working distant pastures. It was rough but solid thick walls, a sturdy roof, and most importantly, shelter from the violence overhead. They stumbled inside just as hail began hammering down, ice balls the size of marbles bouncing off the hard ground. Thorn quickly tended the horses, securing them in the lean-to attached to the cabin's side while Clara lit the kerosene lamp with shaking fingers. The shack was sparse, a narrow bunk, a pot-bellied stove, shelves stocked with basic supplies, but it was dry and safe as the storm unleashed its fury outside. Thunder crashed so close the windows rattled, lightning turning the world white for seconds at a time. "Desert storms," Thorn said, shaking water from his hat as he came back inside. "They build for days, then throw everything at you all at once." Clara wrung water from her hair, suddenly aware of how she must look soaked through. Her careful propriety dissolved. "Thank you. I might have tried to ride back to town." "You'd have been struck by lightning or washed away in a flash flood." He knelt by the stove, feeding kindling into its belly. Seen it happen to men who thought they could outrun weather like this. Soon warmth began to push back the storm's chill. Thorn found coffee in a battered pot, setting it to brew while Clara finger-combed her wet hair. The intimacy of the situation wasn't lost on either of them alone together while nature raged outside. Social conventions as distant as the town they'd left behind. "We could be here a while," Thorn said, handing her a tin cup of bitter coffee. "These storms can last hours." "I've nowhere urgent to be." She wrapped her hands around the warm metal. "Though I imagine tongues will wag regardless. Let them rather have you alive and gossiped about than respectable and drowned." Lightning illuminated his face, and Clara saw something raw there, genuine concern that went beyond courtesy. They sat on opposite ends of the single bench, the storm creating a strange bubble of isolation from the world. "Tell me about your brother," Clara said, surprising herself with the boldness. "You mentioned losing cattle in a flood, but there's more, isn't there?" Thorn was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of old grief. Sam, 8 years younger, full of ideas about progress and civilization. Thought we could make the desert bloom if we just managed the water right. What happened? Water rights? What else? We had claims to several springs, old Spanish grants that went back generations, perfectly legal until someone decided they weren't. Sam went to negotiate with, he paused, with the men who contested our rights, thought he could reason with them. He couldn't. They found him at the bottom of Skeleton Canyon. Horse supposedly spooked. Sent him over the edge. Thorn's knuckles were white around his cup. Funny how his saddlebags were missing. Funnier still how our water claims got tied up in court right after, with no one to testify to their validity. "You think he was murdered?" "I know he was. Can't prove it, but I know." He looked at her directly. "That's what passes for justice out here. Miss Wells. The strong take what they want, and the dead don't argue." Clara set down her cup, moving closer on the bench. "Is that why you stay for justice?" "Maybe. Or maybe I'm just too stubborn to let them win." His smile was bleak. "Sam believed in building something better. I just try to keep what he loved from being destroyed." Thunder crashed overhead, making them both jump. In the aftermath, Clara found her hand covering his. She didn't pull away. "My turn," Thorn said, turning his palm up to interlace their fingers. "What really brought you west?" Clara considered deflecting, maintaining the fiction she'd built. But here, with a storm sealing them away from judgment, truth felt like the only currency worth trading. "Marcus Bennington III, she said. "Boston banking royalty. Everyone said I was lucky when he proposed handsome, wealthy, connected. I said yes because that's what you do, what I was raised to do. But 3 days before the wedding, I found him with my own cousin, in the parlor of what was to be our home." She laughed bitterly. "The scandal wasn't his indiscretion, men have those. The scandal was that I refused to pretend it hadn't happened. I called off the wedding publicly." "Good for you." "Was it his family destroyed my reputation? Said I was hysterical, unstable, that I'd imagined things. My own family urged me to reconsider, think of the connections, the financial security, when I wouldn't." They made it clear I was no longer welcome in their circles. So you ran. So I ran. She looked at their joined hands, all the way to a place where the past supposedly doesn't matter, only to find it follows anyway, just wearing different faces. The lamp flickered as wind found some crack to whistle through. Thorn stood, pulling her up with him, their bodies suddenly close in the small space. The past shapes us, he said quietly, but it doesn't have to define us. Sam taught me that, even if I'm still learning to believe it. Lightning flashed again, throwing their shadows wild against the walls. In that moment, Clara saw him clearly, not the mysterious rancher with secrets, not the man who commanded respect through some unnamed power, but simply Thorn, weathered by loss, shaped by this hard country, but still standing. She lifted her free hand to his face, tracing the line of a scar that ran along his jaw. How? Bar fight. Younger and stupider days. He caught her hand, pressing it against his cheek. Clara, Whatever he might have said was lost as she rose on her toes, bringing their lips together. The kiss was like the storm itself, sudden, overwhelming, inevitable. His arms came around her, one hand tangling in her still damp hair. And for a moment the world narrowed to this, the taste of coffee and rain, the heat between them, the thunder of her heart matching the chaos outside. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, reality crashed back. They stood frozen, caught between desire and propriety, between what they wanted and what was wise. Clara began. We can't, Thorn said simultaneously. They stared at each other, and despite everything, Clara found herself fighting not to laugh at their mutual panic. Here they were, two people who defied convention in their own ways, suddenly struck shy as schoolchildren. The storm's not letting up, Thorn said carefully, stepping back to put space between them. I'll take the floor. You take the bunk. Thorn. Please. His voice was rough. I want to do this right. Clara, you deserve that, not some rough coupling in a line shack while the thunder covers our sounds. You deserve courting and promises and truth, full truth. What truth? But even as she asked, she knew. The warnings, the deference from townspeople, the way Silas Crow had looked at him, there was more to Thorn Carter than a simple horseman's life. Soon, he promised. When I can show you everything, explain it all, just not like this, not when you can't choose freely. She wanted to argue, to say she was choosing, had been choosing since that first day when he stood beside her against the mob. But she saw the honor in his restraint, the respect in his refusal to take advantage of the moment. All right, she said softly. But Thorn, whatever truth you're guarding, it won't change this. She gestured between them. It won't change what I feel. You can't know that. I know you're a good man. The rest is details. He laughed, short and disbelieving. If only it were that simple. They settled in for the long night, Clara on the narrow bunk, despite her protests. Thorn wrapped in a horse blanket by the stove. The storm raged on. But inside the little shack, a different kind of tension hummed between them. Not just desire, though that certainly hadn't faded, but something deeper, understanding, recognition, the peculiar intimacy of two damaged people finding shelter in each other. Tell me about Virginia, Clara said into the darkness. Before the war. And he did, his voice mixing with the rain to paint pictures of green hills and slow rivers, of a boy who'd believed the world could be gentle. She told him about Boston winters and tea services, about teaching children to love books when she'd rather have been writing them herself. They talked until the storm began to exhaust itself, thunder growing distant, rain softening to a steady patter. When Clara finally dozed, she dreamed of water, sometimes violent floods, sometimes quiet springs, but always Thorn's voice promising that in the desert, those who shared water shared everything. Dawn came pale and clean, the world washed new. Thorn was already up, bringing the horses around, but he paused when Clara emerged. "Thank you," she said, "for last night, for all of it." He helped her mount, his hands lingering a moment at her waist. "Ask May about the Maddox Ranch," he said quietly. "When you're ready to know everything, ask her about the water rights and the old Spanish grants, about Samuel Maddox and how he died." "Maddox," Clara repeated, the name tickling something in her memory. "Just remember what you said, about details not changing things." He swung up on his own horse. "Because there are a lot of details, Clara, more than you might want to know." They rode back to town in companionable silence, the desert sparkling with remnants of rain. But Clara's mind was already working, fitting pieces together: Maddox, water rights, a brother's death, a man hiding behind a simpler name. Whatever truth waited in those details, whatever storm was still building between Thorn and men like Silas Crow, Clara knew her course was set. She'd survived Boston's social tempests and Dry Willow's desert fury. Whatever came next, she wouldn't run again. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Main Street as Clara made her way back from the schoolhouse. 3 days had passed since the storm. 3 days of careful normalcy, while questions churned beneath her composed surface. She'd asked May Sullivan about the Maddox Ranch that morning, watching the older woman's face shift from surprise to something like relief. "About time someone asked," May had said, "though I suspect you already know more than you're letting on." Now, approaching the hotel, Clara saw a crowd gathered on the porch. Helena Fairchild held court at the center, her voice carrying clearly across the dusty street. Fascinating what one discovers when one pays attention. Helena was saying, "For instance, did you know our mysterious Mr. Carter bears a striking resemblance to a certain cattle baron from up north, the one who owns half the water rights between here and the Colorado line?" Clara's step faltered. Several heads turned her way, and Helena's smile sharpened with triumph. "Miss Wells, perhaps you can settle our debate. You've spent considerable time with Mr. Carter. Have you noticed anything unusual about a simple horse trainer who can make hardened gunmen step aside with just a look?" "I've noticed he's a gentleman," Clara said evenly, though her heart raced. "Which is more than can be said for those who trade in gossip." "Gossip," Helena laughed, a tinkling sound like breaking glass. "My dear, I trade in facts. Would you like to hear some about Thorn Maddox, who owns the Triple M Ranch, the old Silverton mine, and enough water rights to make Silas Crow foam at the mouth about how he's been playing dressed-down cowboy in our little town?" The crowd murmured, the news spreading like wildfire. Clara felt the ground shifting beneath her feet, but kept her chin high. "Even if that were true," she said, "what business is it of ours how a man chooses to present himself?" "What business?" Helena's eyes glittered. "When he's been courting our new schoolteacher under false pretenses, when he's made fools of us all with his charade. Really, Miss Wells, I'd have thought someone who fled Boston society would recognize a fortune hunter when she saw one." The barb hit home, as Helena had intended. Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks, remembered shame mixing with fresh hurt. Around them, the crowd pressed closer, eager for drama. "Though I suppose," Helena continued, voice dripping honey, "when a woman reaches a certain age without prospects, even a liar looks appealing, especially one with millions in assets." "That's enough." Jake Sullivan pushed through the crowd, the elderly ranch foreman's weathered face set in hard lines. "Mrs. Fairchild, I believe you've had your say. Mr. Sullivan, come to defend your employer. Have you—" Helena's smile never wavered. "How loyal. Tell me, does Mr. Maddox pay extra for you to help maintain his little deceptions?" "He pays me to handle problems," Jake said flatly. "Right now, you're looking like one." The threat in his voice was unmistakable. Helena's husband had been wealthy, But dead men's money only bought so much protection in a town where violence simmered just beneath civilization's veneer. "Are you threatening me, Mr. Sullivan?" "No, ma'am. Just observing that folks who stir up hornets' nests sometimes get stung." Clara stepped forward before the situation could escalate. "Mr. Sullivan, I'd like a word. Privately." She led him away from the crowd, down the alley beside the hotel. Once out of sight, she rounded on him. "Is it true? Is Thorne Carter really Thorne Maddox?" Jake studied her with eyes that had seen too many seasons, too many secrets. "What do you want me to say, miss? That he lied, he gave a name, just not all of it. Man's got reasons." "What reasons could possibly justify?" "His brother's murder, for one." Jake's voice was harsh. "Sam Maddox, killed for trying to hold on to water rights that had been in the family since before this was even American territory. Thorne blamed himself, should have gone to that meeting instead. Should have seen the trap. After Sam died, every fortune hunter and gunslinger in 3 territories came calling, thinking grief made him weak." Clara's anger cooled slightly. "So he hid." "He survived. Started going by Carter when he traveled. Kept business quiet. Then May got it in her head to play matchmaker, and..." Jake shrugged. "Man's been alone a long time. Guess he wanted to see if a woman could want him without the money attached. And now? Now Crow's pushing hard, and hiding won't help anymore. Thorne needs to use every advantage he's got, including the Maddox name and what it carries." Jake fixed her with a steady gaze. "Question is, what are you going to do about it?" Clara looked toward the street, where Helena's voice still carried, spreading the news like poison. Her carefully rebuilt life was crumbling again. Her reputation once more the subject of public speculation. The sensible thing would be to leave. Find another town. Another fresh start. But when had she ever done the sensible thing? "Where is he?" she asked. "Loading supplies at Hendrickson's. But, Miss..." She was already walking away. The crowd parted as she emerged from the alley, their whispers following her down the street. She kept her head high, her stride steady, even as she heard her name tangled with words like fortune hunter and desperate. She found Thorne she couldn't think of him as anyone else, regardless of his full name hefting grain sacks into a wagon bed. He looked up at her approach, and she saw in his face that he already knew. "Clara, not here." She glanced at the curious faces peering from shop windows. "Too many audiences." He helped her onto the wagon seat, then climbed up beside her. They drove in tense silence to the edge of town, stopping near the cemetery where weathered crosses marked the graves of those who'd gambled on the frontier and lost. "You knew this would happen," Clara said once they were alone. "You knew Helena would dig until she found something. I hoped we'd have more time." He wrapped the reins around the brake handle but didn't look at her. "I was going to tell you. After I'd fallen completely in love with Thorne Carter, simple horseman. After you'd had your fill of playing ordinary. After I knew you wouldn't run." His voice was raw. "After I was sure you could see me as something other than a bank account with a tragic past." "So you lied." "I omitted. You lied." She turned to face him fully. "Every conversation, every moment, all built on deception." "Was it?" He finally met her eyes. "Did I lie when I stood with you against that lynch mob, when I showed you the springs and taught you to read the weather, when I held back during the storm because you deserved better than rushed passion? You lied about who you are." "No." His voice grew firm. "I showed you exactly who I am, just not what I own." They sat in charged silence, the desert wind tugging at Clara's hair. In the cemetery, a roadrunner darted between the graves, hunting lizards among the stones. "Tell me," she said finally. "All of it. No more omissions." So he did, about inheriting the ranch at 22, already one of the largest in the territory, about Sam's dreams of modernizing their operations, bringing in new breeding stock and irrigation techniques, about the water rights that went back to a Spanish land grant from 1692 and how those rights had made them targets. Crow approached us first with offers to buy. When we refused, he tried legal challenges. When those failed, Thorn's jaw tightened. Sam thought he could negotiate, thought if he showed Crow the original documents, proved our claims were legitimate, it would end things. But Crow didn't want to negotiate. He wanted Sam out of the way, figured I'd be easier to break. A bitter smile touched his lips. He was almost right. First year after Sam died, I barely held things together. That's when I started using Carter for traveling, for business outside the ranch, kept people from connecting the grieving brother with the land they wanted to steal. Clara absorbed this, fitting it with what she'd observed. But why maintain it here? Why the act with me? Because for the first time in 3 years, someone looked at me and saw a man, not a means to an end. He reached for her hand, stopped himself. Do you know what it's like? Having people size up your worth before they even know your name. Having women who wouldn't glance at Thorn Carter suddenly fascinated by Thorn Maddox. She thought of Boston, of Marcus and his family's calculating gazes. Yes, I know exactly what that's like. Then you understand why I wanted, just once, to be chosen for myself. And now, Clara gestured toward town. Now that everyone knows, now I fight Crow with everything I have. No more hiding. He paused. But I need to know where you stand. I won't blame you if you leave. Your reputation is already in tatters. Clara finished. Helena made sure of that. Fortune hunter, she called me desperate spinster falling for the first man to show interest. Clara, the funny thing is, she's not entirely wrong. She laughed, short and sharp. I am desperate. Desperate for something real in a world full of pretense. Desperate enough to flee across a continent rather than live a lie. She looked at him directly. Desperate enough to forgive a good man for wanting the same thing. I'm not a good man, Thorn said quietly. I've done things to protect what's mine, to honor Sam's memory, things that would horrify your Boston sensibilities. My Boston sensibilities died the day I found my fiancé with another woman and was told to pretend it hadn't happened. She shifted closer on the seat. I don't need a good man. Thorn, I need an honest one. Then you should know Crow won't stop. It's going to get uglier, more dangerous. He's already tried to have me killed twice. Hence Jake's constant hovering. Among other precautions, he finally took her hand, his fingers warm and calloused against hers. This isn't the courtship you deserve, secrets and danger and public scandal. When has anything about us been what we deserved? Clara squeezed his hand. We're both refugees from other lives. Thorn, maybe that's why we recognize each other. The sun was setting, painting the desert in shades of copper and gold. In the distance, Dry Willow looked deceptively peaceful, its buildings dark shapes against the burning sky. There's a stage leaving tomorrow morning. Thorn said, I have money enough to set you up anywhere you want to go. San Francisco, Denver, even back east if you... Don't. The word came out sharper than she intended. Clara pulled her hand free, standing up in the wagon bed despite its sway. Don't you dare try to send me away for my own good. Don't make my choices for me. She looked down at him, this complicated man with his layered names and heavy burdens. I'm staying. Thorn Maddox. Not for your money, not for your ranch, not even for your protection. I'm staying because I choose to. Because I choose you, all of you. Secrets and scandals and whatever comes next. He stood slowly, stepping close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. Even if what comes next is war, because that's what Crow wants, he won't rest until he has every drop of water between here and the mountains. Then we'd better make sure he doesn't get it. His hands came to rest on her waist. You're sure about this about us? Instead of answering, Clara pulled his head down and kissed him, pouring into it all the frustration and fear and fierce determination of the past hours. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, she saw wonder in his face. "Don't leave," he said, and the words carried weight beyond the moment. "Whatever happens next, whatever Crow throws at us, don't leave." "I already told you," Clara said, touching his face. "I'm done running." They drove back to town as stars began to pierce the darkening sky. The main street was quieter now, but Clara could feel eyes watching from windows and doorways. By tomorrow, everyone would know that the school teacher was standing by the revealed millionaire, that Clara Wells had thrown her lot in with Thorne Maddox despite or perhaps because of all his deceptions. Let them talk, she thought. She'd survived Boston's poisonous whispers. She could handle Dry Willow's gossip. What worried her more was the light burning in Silas Crow's office above the bank, and the way shadows moved behind the curtains like predators planning their next hunt. The real storm was still building, and all the truth in the world might not be enough to weather it. The stagecoach should have reached Devil's Cut by mid-morning. That's what worried Clara as she stood at the schoolhouse window, watching dust clouds gather on the horizon. She'd sent 3 of her students, the Mendez children, home on that coach to visit their grandmother in Las Cruces. Now it was past noon, and no word had come. "Miss Wells." Timothy Harper tugged at her sleeve. "Are we doing arithmetic?" "In a moment. Timothy." She forced a smile, though unease prickled along her spine. Devil's Cut was notorious a sharp bend in the road where the land dropped away into a maze of arroyos. Perfect country for hoofbeats thundered up Main Street. Jake Sullivan pulled his lathered horse to a stop outside, his face grim. "Miss Wells, you need to come now. The children are safe, but there's been trouble." She dismissed the remaining students and followed Jake to where Thorne waited with saddled horses. His expression told her everything she needed to know. "Crow?" she asked, mounting quickly. "His men. Stage was hit at Devil's Cut." Thorne's voice was tight with controlled fury. "Driver's dead. Passengers robbed and scattered. But that's not the worst of it." They rode hard toward the cut, joined by several of Thorne's men who materialized from the landscape like dust devils. Clara had suspected he had protection she couldn't see. Now she witnessed the small army that guarded the Maddox interests. "What's worse than robbery and murder?" she asked as they slowed to navigate a wash. "The message they left." Jake said, "Specifically for you, miss." At Devil's Cut, the overturned stagecoach lay like a dead beetle, wheels spinning uselessly in the air. The strongbox had been blown open, mail scattered across the rocks. But it was the paper pinned to the driver's chest that made Clara's blood run cold. "Water rights for safe passage" was scrawled in black letters. Below it, "The school teacher knows the price." "They're not even pretending it's random anymore," Thorne said, carefully removing the paper. "This is declaration of war." "But why involve me?" Clara knelt beside the scattered mail, gathering what she could. "I have no claim to—" She stopped, a letter in her hand. Her name stared back at her, but the return address made no sense. "Samuel Maddox, attorney at law, Santa Fe." Thorne went very still. "That's not possible. Sam's been dead 3 years. With trembling fingers, Clara opened the letter. The legal language was dense, but the meaning was clear. Samuel Maddox had filed documents making her a partial beneficiary of certain water rights, pending proof of claim. "I don't understand." Clara said, "I never met your brother. Why would he—" "The date," Thorne said hoarsely. "Look at the date." 3 days before Samuel's death. "He knew," Jake said quietly. Somehow, Sam knew they were coming for him. This was insurance spreading the claim, so killing him wouldn't be enough. "But why me? I wasn't even in the territory then." Thorne studied the document more carefully. "It's not you specifically. It's the lawful bride of Thorne Maddox. Sam was always pushing me to marry, to secure the family line. This must have been his failsafe if something happened to him. And I married. My wife would automatically have claim to these specific water rights, making her a target." Clara finished. Crow must have found out somehow. That's why— She stopped as the full implications hit her. He's going to come after me. Like hell he will. Thorne's hand went to his gun. Jake, get the men. We're taking Clara back to the ranch. Today. No. Clara stood, brushing dust from her skirts. If I run now, I'll be running forever. And what about my students? The families who trust me? Your students will understand staying alive, Jake said bluntly. A sound made them all turn horses, approaching fast. Thorne pushed Clara behind the overturned coach, guns appearing in hands like deadly magic. But the riders who crested the hill flew a white flag. Truce, the lead rider called. Mr. Crow wants to parley. Crow can go to hell, Thorne responded. He said you'd say that. The rider, a thin man with dead eyes, smiled. Also said to tell the schoolteacher he has something belongs to her, something that went missing from the stage. Clara's heart stopped. The children. He has the Mendez children. Now, Mr. Crow prefers to call them guests. They're safe and sound, playing in his garden, but children are unpredictable, aren't they? Accidents happen, especially around all that mining equipment, mister. Crow's been moving. Thorne had to physically hold Clara back. If he harms those children, nobody wants harm to come to innocence, the messenger said smoothly. Mr. Crow simply wants to discuss a business proposition. The schoolteacher comes to hear him out alone and the children go free. She's not going anywhere alone, Thorne growled. Then the children stay as guests indefinitely. The man's smile never wavered. Mr. Crow's at the old Silverton mine. You know the place. Maddox, where your brother used to dream about reopening the shafts. The lady has 1 hour. They wheeled and rode off, leaving dust and dread in their wake. It's a trap, Jake said immediately. Obviously a trap. Of course it is, Clara said, already walking to her horse. But he has Miguel, Rosa, and little Anna. I won't leave them in his hands. Clara, no. Thorne caught her arm. This is exactly what he wants to isolate you, to use you as leverage against me. Then give me an alternative. She pulled free, anger flashing. Those children are in danger because of their association with me. I won't abandon them. We'll get them back another way. How storm his compound, start a war with children in the crossfire? Clara shook her head. I'm going— Thorne, the question is whether you're going to help me or hinder me. They locked eyes, wills clashing like flint against steel. Finally. Thorne cursed in a way that would have scandalized Boston society. Jake, take half the men and circle around to the mine's back entrance. The old ventilation shafts, Sam mapped them all. He turned to Clara. You'll go in the front, but you're not going alone. I'll be damned if I let you walk into Crow's web without backup. He said you had to come alone. He didn't say you had to stay alone. Thorne's smile was sharp as a blade. We play by frontier rules now. That means we make our own. They planned quickly, time burning away like fuse cord. Clara would enter openly, distract Crow with negotiations. Meanwhile, Thorne and his men would infiltrate through the mine shafts Sam had explored years ago, positioning themselves for rescue or battle. Take this. Thorne pressed a derringer into Clara's hand. 2 shots. Close range only. Hide it well. I've never shot anyone. Pray you don't have to start, but if it comes to it. He cupped her face, his touch gentle despite the violence brewing around them. Come back to me. Clara, whatever it takes, come back. She kissed him quickly, tasting dust and determination. Get those children out safely. Nothing else matters. The ride to the Silverton mine felt both endless and too quick. The abandoned site sprawled across the hillside like a cancer-rusted equipment, gaping shaft entrances, and buildings slowly collapsing back into the earth. But fresh horses and armed men showed Crow had revitalized the corpse for his purposes. Clara was met at the main gate. Searched perfunctorily, they missed the derringer hidden in her boot and escorted to what had been the mine office. Inside, Silas Crow sat behind a massive desk like a spider in his web. All black clothes and patient malice. "Miss Wells, so good of you to accept my invitation." He gestured to chairs where 3 small figures huddled. "Children, say hello to your teacher." Miss Clara, Anna, only 6, started to run to her but was held back by an armed guard. "It's all right, sweetheart," Clara said, keeping her voice calm despite the rage building in her chest. "We'll go home soon." "Will you?" Crow leaned back, studying her. "That depends entirely on how reasonable you're willing to be. Release the children first, then we'll discuss your terms." "My dear woman, you seem confused about who holds the cards here." He produced a document from his desk. "But I'm willing to be generous. Sign this a simple transfer of your supposed water claims to my holdings, and everyone walks away happy." Clara scanned the paper. It was more than water rights. It would give Crow claim to significant Maddox land holdings. "These aren't mine to sign away?" "Ah, but they are. Or will be, once you marry Maddox." His smile was reptilian. "Oh yes, I know all about Sam's clever little insurance policy. Romantic fool thought spreading the claims would protect them. Instead, he just created more targets." "Then why not simply wait if I don't marry Thorne? The claims remain with his estate." "Because Thorne Maddox has proven irritatingly hard to kill." Crow's casual tone made the words more chilling. 3 attempts, all failed. The man has 9 lives and an army of loyal fools. But you're softer, more vulnerable, more reasonable." A distant rumble shook dust from the rafters. Crow frowned, glancing toward the door. Clara kept her expression neutral. Though hope flared, Thorne was in position. "The thing about soft targets," Clara said, standing slowly, "is that they often surprise you." She moved toward the children, placing herself between them and Crow's desk. "Miguel, take your sister's hands. When I say run, you go straight for the door." "Sit down, Miss Wells." Crow's voice hardened. "No one's going anywhere until—" Another rumble. Stronger this time. Shouts echoed from outside. Crow stood, reaching for his gun, just as Clara pulled the derringer from her boot. "Run," she shouted. The children bolted. Crow's gun swung toward them, and Clara fired without thinking. The small gun barked, her shot going wide but forcing Crow to dive aside. Guards rushed in as Clara grabbed Anna, pushing all 3 children behind the heavy desk. Then the world exploded into chaos. Thorne and his men burst through 3 entrances at once, guns blazing. The office became a battlefield, bullets splintering wood and shattering glass. Clara covered the children with her body, feeling splinters rain down as shots passed overhead. "Clara," Thorne's voice cut through the mayhem. "Back door now." She herded the children toward him, staying low. Crow rose from behind an overturned cabinet, his gun tracking their movement. Time slowed as Clara saw his finger tighten on the trigger, saw the barrel align with little Anna's back. She didn't remember moving. One moment she was behind the children, the next she was between them and Crow's gun. The derringer's second shot was steadier, guided by protective fury rather than fear. Crow clutched his shoulder, cursing as his gun fell. Clara felt more than heard Thorne beside her, his larger pistol finishing what her derringer had started. Crow collapsed, his empire of stolen water crumbling with him. "Are you hurt?" Thorne's hands ran over her, checking for wounds. "I'm fine. The children—" "Jake has them. They're safe." He pulled her against him, his heart hammering against her chest. "You magnificent, reckless fool. You could have been killed." "So could they." She was shaking now, reaction setting in. "I couldn't let him." "I know." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "I know. It's over now." But it wasn't quite over. As Thorne's men secured the surviving guards and Miguel led the children to safety, Clara noticed a stack of documents on Crow's desk. Water claims, land deeds, political correspondence, evidence of corruption reaching all the way to the territorial capital. "He kept records of everything," she said, gathering the papers. "Bribes, murders, false claims, it's all here." "Enough to clean house," Jake said, whistling low. "Judge Harrigan, Sheriff Watson, half the territorial legislature, they're all implicated." "Sam would have loved this," Thorne said quietly. "Using the law to finish what violence started." Outside, the sun was setting, painting the desert in shades of justice and redemption. The Mendez children were reunited with their mother, who'd ridden out with the reinforcements. Clara watched them embrace, feeling something ease in her chest. "You saved them," Father Miguel said, appearing at her elbow. "At great risk to yourself. Anyone would have—" "No," the priest interrupted gently. "Not anyone. You chose to stand between innocence and evil. That is a rare courage, Miss Wells." "Soon to be Mrs. Maddox," Thorne said, joining them. He showed Clara the water claim document. "If you're willing, Sam's failsafe only works if we make it legal." Clara looked at the paper, then at the man holding it, covered in dust and gun smoke, marked by violence but standing tall. He was nothing like the gentleman of Boston society. Thank God. "Is this a proposal, Mr. Maddox?" "It's a partnership offer," he said seriously. "Full disclosure of all assets and dangers, equal say in all decisions, shared risk, shared reward, and my promise to never again hide who I am." "What about love?" Clara asked. "Does that factor into your partnership terms?" His expression softened. "Love is the only reason any of this matters. Without it, water and land are just dirt and possibility. With it—" He took her hand. "With it, we build something worth fighting for." Around them, Dry Willow's rough citizens were gathering, drawn by gunfire and gossip. Clara saw their faces suspicious, hopeful, waiting to see what kind of people would emerge from this crucible of violence. "Yes," she said simply, "partners in all things." The cheer that went up probably reached the mountains. In the middle of it, Clara realized her transformation was complete. The Boston schoolteacher who'd arrived weeks ago would have been horrified by standing in a battlefield, accepting a proposal born of danger and necessity. But that woman had never known the fierce joy of protecting what mattered, the bone-deep satisfaction of standing against evil and winning. She'd never known that sometimes the most civilized thing you could do was meet savagery with steady hands and steadier hearts. As Thorne kissed her there among the ruins of Crow's empire, Clara Wells, soon to be Clara Maddox, discovered that perhaps she'd been born for the frontier after all. It had simply taken her 26 years and a journey across a continent to find where she belonged. The desert wind rose, carrying away gun smoke and old fears, leaving only the promise of water, the certainty of love, and the knowledge that some battles were worth any price to win. The acrid smell of smoke pulled Clara from her sleep. Through the window of the ranch house, orange light danced against the darkness. The barn was ablaze. She shook Thorne awake as shouts erupted across the compound. "Fire, all hands." They rushed outside to find chaos. Flames leaped from the barn's roof, horses screaming in terror within. Ranch hands formed bucket brigades, but the fire was spreading too fast, fed by stored hay and timber-dry wood. "The horses," Jake Sullivan emerged from the smoke, coughing. "Still got 6 trapped in the back stalls." Without hesitation, Thorne plunged into the burning structure. Clara grabbed a bucket, joining the line of workers desperately trying to contain the blaze. Through the smoke and confusion, she saw other fires blooming: the grain storage, the equipment shed. This was no accident. "Riders coming," someone shouted. "From the east." Clara's heart sank. Crow was dead, but his men hadn't scattered as hoped. Instead, They'd regrouped under his lieutenant, Marcus Trent, a man who made his former boss look reasonable. The trial was set for next week. The evidence they'd gathered would destroy the corruption ring. Unless that evidence burned tonight. Clara Thorne emerged from the barn, leading 2 terrified horses. His shirt was singed, his hands already blistering. Get to the house, lock the doors. The documents are in the safe, go. But Clara was already running not to safety, but toward the office where weeks of gathered evidence waited. The small building stood separate from the main conflagration, but she could see riders circling, torches in hand. She burst through the door just as glass shattered. A torch arced through the broken window, oil spreading liquid fire across the floor. Clara lunged for the safe, spinning the combination with practiced fingers as smoke began to fill the room. The metal door swung open. Inside lay their hope for justice ledgers, contracts, correspondence that would jail half the territory's corrupt officials. She grabbed everything, stuffing documents into a leather satchel as flames licked closer. The door exploded inward. Marcus Trent stood silhouetted against the night, gun drawn. Should have run when you had the chance. Teacher. Clara clutched the satchel, backing toward the window. These documents will see justice done, with or without me. Justice, Trent laughed. Only justice out here comes from the barrel of a gun. He raised his weapon, and Clara prepared to throw herself aside. Then Trent jerked, a dark stain spreading across his chest. He toppled forward, revealing Thorne in the doorway, his face a mask of controlled fury. You all right? He pulled her toward the door as the flames reached the walls. The documents are safe. They stumbled into the night to find the tide turning, drawn by the flames. Neighboring ranchers had arrived, the Hendersons, the Fullers, even families from the Mexican settlement. What Trent's men had expected to be an easy raid had become a battle. Fall back, Thorne commanded his men. Let them come to us. The defenders formed a line between the burning buildings and the main house. Clara found herself beside Rosa Mendez's mother, Maria, who handled a rifle with surprising expertise. For our children, Maria said grimly. For their future. The raiders charged, expecting fear and chaos. Instead, they met determined resistance from a community that had endured enough. The firefight was brief but decisive. Faced with organized opposition, Trent's leaderless men scattered into the desert night. As dawn approached, the fires were finally controlled. The barn was a total loss, along with 2 storage buildings, but the house stood intact. More importantly, no lives were lost, though several bore burns and wounds that Clara tended with steady hands. They'll be back, Jake said, surveying the damage. Men like that don't give up easy. Then we'll be ready, Thorne replied. He sat shirtless as Clara wrapped his burned hands, her touch gentle but thorough. Send riders to every honest ranch within 50 miles. Tell them what happened here. Tell them it's time to choose sides. You're talking about war, Father Miguel observed. The priest had arrived with the dawn, organizing help for the injured. I'm talking about survival, Thorne corrected. Crow's dead, but his poison runs deep. We can't root it out alone. You're not alone. Henderson spoke up. The grizzled rancher had lost water rights to Crow's manipulations years ago. My boys and I stand with you. Mine too, Fuller added. Others nodded agreement. Clara felt something shift in the air, individual grievances crystallizing into collective resolve. This was how civilization truly came to wild places, not through distant laws or paper proclamations, but through people standing together against chaos. We need a plan, she said, her teacher's mind already organizing. Fortifications, supplies, communication between ranches. What we need, a new voice interrupted, is to make this legal. Everyone turned to see Judge Theodore Burnham dismounting from a lathered horse. Unlike the corrupt Judge Harrigan, Burnham had a reputation for stubborn honesty which had kept him relegated to a minor circuit court. Begging your pardon for the intrusion, Burnham continued. But news of last night's excitement reached Fort Sumner, the territorial governors finally taking interest. Seems the murder of a prominent businessman and attacks on established ranchers warrant investigation. Crow was no businessman. Jake spat. He was a thief and murderer. Which these documents prove conclusively, Clara said, retrieving the satchel she'd risked her life for. Will the governor act on evidence? Burnham's weathered face creased in what might have been a smile. Governor Wallace is many things, but he's not stupid. With Crow dead and his papers exposed, supporting the corruption ring becomes politically inadvisable. He's dispatching federal marshals to arrest Judge Harrigan and Sheriff Watson. Asked me to hold emergency court sessions to sort out the water rights mess. Just like that, Thorne sounded skeptical. After years of looking the other way, dead martyrs make better headlines than live criminals, Burnham said pragmatically. Besides, you've given him an excuse to clean house and look heroic doing it. Politicians love that sort of opportunity. Over the next hours, as the community worked to clear debris and tend wounds, a remarkable transformation occurred. Judge Burnham set up court in the Maddox main house, using the dining table as his bench, one by one. Ranchers and farmers came forward with their grievances, stolen water rights, forged documents, intimidation that had driven families from their land. Clara watched Thorne navigate this new battlefield of legal procedures and testimonies. Where another man might have sought vengeance for the night's attack, he pursued justice through proper channels. It was what Sam would have wanted, law bringing order to lawlessness. The court recognizes the validity of the original Spanish grants, Burnham declared after reviewing the evidence. All water rights obtained through fraud or coercion are hereby nullified. Furthermore, this court recommends criminal prosecution for those involved in perpetrating said fraud. A cheer went up from the assembled crowd. For the first time in years, honest families saw hope for reclaiming what had been stolen. As the impromptu court session continued, Clara found herself deputized as clerk, her neat handwriting recording decisions that would reshape the territory. Between cases, she caught Thorne watching her with an expression of profound gratitude. "Thank you," he said during a brief recess, "for saving those documents, for standing with me through all of this. Partners, remember," she touched his bandaged hands gently, "in all things." "About that?" Thorne glanced around, then pulled her into the hallway. "I know we agreed to marry for legal reasons, to secure the water rights, but—" "Thorne Maddox," Clara interrupted. "If you're about to suggest we delay our wedding because of last night's unpleasantness, you should know I still have that derringer." His laugh was surprised and genuine. "Actually, I was going to suggest we move it up. Judge Burnham's here, Father Miguel's here, half the territory's here. Seems like Providence." Clara felt her heart skip. "Now today I'm covered in soot and my dress is ruined and you're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." Thorne finished. "Brave and brilliant and absolutely perfect. But if you want to wait—" "I've done enough waiting," Clara decided. "Let's make it official before anything else catches fire." The ceremony took place at sunset, in the courtyard between the main house and the burned barn. Someone had strung lanterns between the remaining buildings, and wildflowers appeared from mysterious sources to create a makeshift bouquet. Clara wore a simple day dress borrowed from Maria Mendez, while Thorne had managed a clean shirt despite his bandages. "Dearly beloved," Father Miguel began, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd. "We gather in this place of trial and triumph to witness something eternal, the joining of two souls who have found in each other not just love, but purpose." Clara barely heard the traditional words. She was too focused on Thorne's eyes, on the way his damaged hands still held hers with infinite care, on the impossible journey that had brought them to this moment. "The rings?" Father Miguel asked. Jake Sullivan stepped forward with two simple bands, not the elaborate jewelry of Boston society, but honest gold that caught the dying light. "With this ring," Thorne said, his voice rough with emotion, I pledge not just my worldly goods, but my trust, my truth, and my tomorrow. No more secrets, no more hiding, only us, facing whatever comes. With this ring, Clara echoed, sliding the band over his burned fingers with careful tenderness. I pledge to stand beside you in drought and plenty, in peace and conflict, in joy and sorrow. Your fights are my fights. Your dreams are my dreams. Then, by the authority vested in me by God and the territory of New Mexico, Father Miguel proclaimed, I pronounce you husband and wife, and may God help anyone who tries to separate what he has joined. The kiss that sealed their union was brief but profound, tasting of smoke and promise and the peculiar sweetness of love forged in adversity. Around them, the crowd erupted in celebration, Anglo and Mexican, rich and poor, all united in this moment of hope. Now what? Clara asked as well-wishers surrounded them. Now we rebuild, Thorne said. The barn, the community, the whole damn territory if we have to. But first, he winced as someone clapped his shoulder. First, I think we tend these burns before I pass out and ruin our wedding night. Clara laughed, the sound bright against the darkening sky. Ever the romantic, Mr. Maddox? Mrs. Maddox, he corrected, and the name felt like both an ending and a beginning. As stars emerged overhead, the wedding celebration merged with plans for the future. Judge Burnham would stay to oversee fair distribution of water rights. The federal marshals would arrive within days to arrest the corrupt officials. And the alliance formed to night ranchers, farmers, townspeople standing together would ensure that no new Silas Crow could rise to power. Your brother would be proud, Clara told Thorne as they watched their neighbors dance to fiddle music in the courtyard. Sam always believed in the law. Thorne agreed. Took me too long to understand he was right. Violence might win battles, but justice wins wars. And love? Clara asked. What does love win? Thorne pulled her close, mindful of his bandages. Everything worth having. The celebration continued deep into the night, a defiant joy rising from the ashes of attempted destruction. In the morning, there would be rebuilding to organize, legal battles to finish, a territory to help heal. But tonight, under the vast western sky, two souls who had found each other across scandal and secrecy, violence and virtue, celebrated the greatest victory of all. They had chosen each other, chosen this place, chosen to build rather than burn, and in that choosing, they had already won. The morning sickness hit Clara as she supervised the planting of the cottonwood sapling beside the new well. She gripped the fence post, willing her stomach to settle while Maria Mendez watched with knowing eyes. How far along, Senora? Maria asked quietly, handing her a cup of ginger tea. 3 months, perhaps 4. Clara accepted the tea gratefully. We haven't told anyone yet. The land knows. Maria smiled, gesturing to the green shoots pushing through soil that had been barren just weeks before. New life calls to new life. It had been 6 months since the fire, 6 months since their hasty wedding amid smoke and chaos. The ranch had transformed, new barns rose where the old had burned. Irrigation channels carried precious water to previously unused fields. And most remarkably, a proper schoolhouse stood at the property's edge, welcoming children from across the valley. Mrs. Maddox. Young Ana Mendez ran up, braids flying. Papa says to tell you fancy carriage coming up the road. Clara shaded her eyes, studying the approaching vehicle. Eastern made, with matched horses and a liveried driver completely out of place on their dusty roads. Her stomach tightened, this time not from morning sickness. Anna, run find Mr. Maddox. Tell him we have visitors. The carriage rolled to a stop before the main house. Clara had just enough time to smooth her hair and dust from her practical work dress before the door opened and her past stepped out. Margaret Bennington Nee Whitfield, her own cousin descended in traveling silks and Boston superiority. Behind her, a man in an expensive suit clutched a leather portfolio. Clara, Margaret's voice dripped false sweetness. "How rustic you look." "Margaret?" Clara kept her tone neutral. "This is unexpected." "Is it when we heard about your marriage to this Maddox person?" Naturally, the family grew concerned. After your previous scandal, we couldn't allow another embarrassment. "I wasn't aware I needed your permission to marry." "Don't be obtuse." Margaret's gaze swept dismissively over the ranch. "Mr. Hartwell here represents the family's interests. We've come to rectify your situation." The lawyer stepped forward, adjusting his spectacles. "Mrs. Maddox, I'm authorized to offer you a generous settlement to annul this marriage and return east. The family is prepared to reinstate your position, with conditions." "Conditions?" Clara felt Thorne's presence before she saw him. His quiet approach from the barn, reassuring. "Afternoon, folks," Thorne said mildly, though Clara recognized the steel beneath. "Something we can help you with." Margaret's eyes widened slightly at his appearance, tall, sun-weathered, wearing work clothes and a gun belt like he'd been born to them. Not the fortune hunter she'd expected. "Mr. Maddox, I presume." Hartwell consulted his papers. "I'm here regarding certain irregularities in your marriage to Miss Whitfield." "Mrs. Maddox," Thorne corrected. "And unless you're a territorial judge, I don't see how our marriage is your business." "It becomes our business when theft is involved." Margaret interjected. Clara took items from the Whitfield estate, family jewelry, including a pearl necklace worth considerable money. Clara felt the accusation like a physical blow. "Those were my mother's pearls. She left them to me." "The estate inventory suggests otherwise." Hartwell produced a document. "We're prepared to file criminal charges unless the items are returned and this situation is resolved." "You mean unless I abandon my marriage and crawl back to Boston in disgrace?" Clara translated. "Such dramatic language." Margaret smoothed her skirts. "We're offering you redemption, cousin, a chance to return to civilization, to your own kind." "My own kind?" Clara stepped closer to Thorne. "You mean the kind who smile while spreading poison, who care more about appearances than truth?" "The kind who don't associate with frontier criminals," Margaret snapped, dropping her facade. "Oh yes, we've heard all about your husband's activities. The violence, the questionable business practices. How long before he's hanged for murder, leaving you a disgraced widow twice over?" The accusation hung in the air like gun smoke. Clara saw Jake and several hands drifting closer, drawn by raised voices. The school children had stopped their lessons to peer through windows. This was her life now, not hidden behind closed doors, but lived in the open, for better or worse. "Mr. Hartwell," Clara said with forced calm. "I believe you'll find those pearls were specifically bequeathed to me in my mother's will, a copy of which is filed in Boston proper. As for criminal charges, I welcome your attempt. I'm certain the territorial judge would be fascinated to hear how the Whitfield family treats their own." "You're making a mistake," Margaret warned. "This offer won't be repeated." "Good." Clara felt Thorne's hand find hers, steady and sure. "Then let me be absolutely clear. I am exactly where I belong, with exactly who I deserve. I won't return to Boston. I won't annul my marriage. And I certainly won't apologize for choosing happiness over your approval." Hartwell cleared his throat. "There's also the matter of the Bennington breach of promise suit. They're prepared to pursue damages." "Let them." Thorne spoke up. "My wife's told me all about Marcus Bennington's character. I'd welcome the chance to discuss it in open court. Jake, would you fetch those federal marshals? I believe they're still in town." "Federal marshals?" Hartwell paled. "Cleaning up corruption," Jake drawled, not moving but managing to look menacing anyway. "Amazing what rats come crawling out when you start looking close at financial records, banking records especially." Clara bit back a smile. There were no federal marshals in town currently, but Hartwell didn't know that. "This is intolerable," Margaret huffed. "Clara, you're destroying your last chance at respectability." "No," Clara corrected. "I'm building something better than respectability. I'm building a life based on truth." As if to emphasize her point, Father Miguel chose that moment to arrive with his usual impeccable timing. "Mrs. Maddox, the children have prepared their recitation." "Oh, forgive me. I didn't realize you had guests." "They were just leaving," Clara said firmly. Margaret's face cycled through several shades of red. "This isn't over. When you're destitute and abandoned, don't come crying." "Ma'am," Jake interrupted politely, "your driver's looking peaked. This heat don't agree with everyone. Might be best to start back before it gets worse." The threat was veiled but clear. Margaret gathered her skirts with whatever dignity remained. "You've made your choice, cousin. May you live to regret it." "I'm sure I'll live," Clara replied, "happily and well." The carriage departed in a cloud of dust and indignation. Clara stood watching until it disappeared, feeling the last chains of her old life snap. "You all right?" Thorne asked quietly. "Better than all right." She turned to face him, her hand moving instinctively to her still flat stomach. "Though perhaps we should discuss expanding the house. We'll be needing more room soon." Thorne's eyes widened. "Clara, are you due sometime in autumn? Maria thinks." She couldn't contain her smile at his stunned expression. "Surprise?" He swept her into his arms, spinning her around while Jake whooped and the schoolchildren cheered, not quite understanding but celebrating anyway. When he set her down, his eyes were suspiciously bright. "A baby," he marveled. "Sam would have been over the moon. Uncle Thorne, he always said, 'When are you going to—'" His voice caught. "He knows," Clara said softly. "Somehow, I think he knows." Father Miguel beamed at them. "Truly, this is a day for blessings, new life for the valley, new hope for the future. Though perhaps, Mrs. Maddox, you should sit for the recitation. The sun is quite strong." They moved to the schoolhouse, where 15 children of various ages and backgrounds waited to show off their learning. Clara watched with pride as they recited poetry, demonstrated arithmetic, and read passages in both English and Spanish. This was her respectability, not Boston drawing rooms, but eager minds growing strong, not whispered gossip, but forthright neighbors who'd stood with them against fire and violence. Not the suffocating propriety of her cousin's world, but the honest work of building something lasting. "Mrs. Maddox," Timothy Harper raised his hand. "Is it true that mean lady was your kin?" "Yes, Timothy, but she was nothing like you," Anna observed with a child's clarity. "She looked at us like we were dirt." "Some people," Clara said carefully, "believe they're better than others because of where they were born or how much money they have. But what really matters is how we treat each other." "Like when Mr. Maddox made sure everyone got water rights fair and square?" Miguel asked. "Exactly like that." As the recitation concluded and parents arrived to collect their children, Clara felt the day's confrontation settling into perspective. Margaret had been right about one thing: she had made her choice. But it wasn't the choice her cousin assumed. She'd chosen courage over comfort, purpose over position, love over lucre. And now, with new life growing within her and new lives blooming all around, she couldn't imagine choosing differently. "You know they might actually try to pursue those charges," Thorne said as they walked back to the house. "Let them try. I have the will, the pearls, and the truth." Clara leaned into his solid warmth. "Besides, something tells me the Whitfield family won't want too much legal scrutiny. Margaret's husband has his own secrets." "Do tell." "Later. Right now, I want to focus on our news." She placed his hand on her stomach. "Our future." "Samuel Thomas Maddox," Thorne said immediately. "If it's a boy." "And if it's a girl?" "Your choice, though." He grinned. Clara Hope Maddox has a nice ring, for the woman who brought hope back to this dusty corner of the world. They stood together in the doorway of their home, looking out over the land they'd fought to protect and the community they'd helped to heal. The cottonwood sapling by the well had taken root, its leaves rustling with promise. In the distance, storm clouds gathered, but they were the good kind, bringing rain to nurture what they'd planted. "No regrets?" Thorne asked. Clara thought of Boston's manicured parks and stifling propriety, of the life she'd fled and the lies she'd refused to live. Then she looked at her husband's weathered hands, already planning cradles and nurseries. She felt the flutter of new life within her, saw the children racing home with their lessons, heard the distant lowing of cattle on land that would never know Crow's corruption. "Not one," she said, and meant it. That night, as they lay entwined in their bed, Clara wrote in the journal she'd started keeping. "Margaret asked if I'd live to regret my choices. I will live, that much is certain. But regret, how can I regret finding truth in a land that demands honesty? How can I regret love that survived every test? How can I regret the life growing within me? Proof that from ashes and adversity, beauty still blooms. Let my cousin keep her Boston propriety and her poisoned respectability. I have something worth infinitely more, a home built on truth, a love tested by fire, and a future as wide as the western sky." She set aside the journal and curled into Thorne's embrace, listening to his steady breathing and the night sounds of their ranch. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, it always did. But tonight, she was simply Clara Maddox, teacher, wife, and soon-to-be mother, living a life that was entirely and authentically her own. And that, she knew, was worth more than all the pearl necklaces and Boston mansions in the world. The autumn wind carried the scent of sage and possibility as Clara stood on the porch, watching her son take his first wobbling steps across the worn planks. Samuel Thomas Maddox, 15 months old and already showing his father's determination, reached for Jake Sullivan's outstretched hands with a crow of triumph. "That's it, little boss," Jake encouraged, his weathered face creased in a rare smile. "Your PA was just about as stubborn when he learned—" "Everything all right out here." Thorne emerged from the house, ledgers under his arm, to sweep his son up in a careful embrace. The boy immediately grabbed for his father's hat, babbling excitedly. "More than all right," Clara said, her hand moving to her swelling belly where their second child grew. "Though I think someone's ready for his nap." It had been 2 years since that desperate night of fire and violence. 2 years since their impromptu wedding amid chaos. The ranch had not just rebuilt, but flourished, where once a single well had served. Now 3 powered irrigation systems that turned dusty acres into productive farmland. The schoolhouse had expanded to 2 rooms, serving 43 students from across the valley. In Mrs. Maddox, Rosa Mendez, now 14, and Clara's assistant teacher, called from the schoolyard. The new maps arrived from Santa Fe. Clara made her way across the yard, noting with satisfaction how the cottonwood by the original well had grown tall enough to provide real shade. Its roots ran deep now, just like theirs in this community. In the schoolhouse, she found Father Miguel examining the maps with interest. "These will help the children understand their place in the territory," he said. "See here, they've marked all the new water agreements, the railroad extensions, even the consolidated school districts. All the changes Thorne helped push through the territorial legislature," Clara added with quiet pride. Her husband had discovered a talent for politics, not the corrupt backroom dealing of Crow's era, but honest coalition building among ranchers, farmers, and townspeople. "Speaking of changes," Father Miguel's eyes twinkled, "I heard from Bishop Lamy. The church is approving funds for a proper hospital in Dry Willow. They need someone to organize it, perhaps teach the sisters basic medical knowledge." "As if I don't have enough to occupy my time." Clara laughed, but she was already considering it. Access to medical care would save lives, especially during childbirth, a thought particularly relevant given her condition. That evening, as purple shadows stretched across the desert, the Maddox Ranch hosted its monthly community gathering. What had started as emergency meetings during the crisis had evolved into a cherished tradition. Families brought food to share while men discussed water tables and cattle prices. Women exchanged news and remedies, and children played elaborate games among the outbuildings. Clara moved through the crowd with practiced ease, Samuel on her hip, stopping to admire Maria's new baby or discuss the school's winter needs with parents. This was her element now, not the stilted conversations of Boston society, but the honest exchanges of people building something together. "You've done well, child," a familiar voice said. Clara turned to find Helena Fairchild, the banker's widow who'd once warned her about frontier wolves. Time had softened Helena's sharp edges, especially after Thorne had helped save her late husband's legitimate investments from the corruption scandal. "We've all done well," Clara replied diplomatically. "No false modesty, my dear. This," Helena gestured to the thriving gathering, "exists because you and your husband refused to run when things got difficult. You showed us that standing together was possible." Before Clara could respond, a commotion near the road drew everyone's attention. A lone rider approached fast, his horse lathered with hard travel. Clara recognized him as one of the hands from the Henderson ranch. "Indians," the man gasped as he half fell from his saddle. "Apache war party, moving this way. They hit the stage line near Wagon Mound. Killed 6. Fear rippled through the crowd. Apache raids had been rare in recent years, but when they came, they brought terror. Clara instinctively clutched Samuel tighter as Thorne stepped forward, already shifting into leadership mode. "How many which direction?" 20, maybe 30 warriors, coming down through Skeleton Canyon." The messenger accepted water gratefully. "Military's a day behind, if they're coming at all." Clara watched Thorne process this information, saw the moment he made his decision. "Jake, send riders to every ranch within 10 miles. Tell them to come here, we'll make our stand together. Henderson, Fuller, help me organize defenses. Women and children to the main house." "I'm not hiding," Clara said quietly but firmly. Thorne turned to her, and she saw the war between his protective instincts and his respect for her strength. "Clara, I can shoot. You taught me yourself. And someone needs to coordinate medical supplies, food, water for a siege." She passed Samuel to Maria. "We do this together. Remember." The next hours passed in controlled chaos. Fortifications rose around the ranch compound while riders spread the alarm. Families arrived throughout the night, bringing what weapons and supplies they could. By dawn, nearly 100 people had gathered the community that had been forged in earlier fires, now united against a new threat. Clara organized the main house like a military hospital, designating areas for wounded, stockpiling medical supplies, assigning older children to help with younger ones. She tried not to think about the stories she'd heard of Apache raids, focusing instead on what could be controlled. The attack came with the noon sun. Warriors materialized from the desert heat like lethal mirages, their war cries chilling in the still air. But they found no easy target: the consolidated defense, with riflemen at every window and barrier, met them with disciplined fire. Clara manned a second-floor window, Rosa beside her reloading rifles with steady hands. Through the gun smoke, she saw Thorne directing the defense from the courtyard, exposed but unwavering. Jake Sullivan fought beside him, the old foreman proving that age hadn't diminished his skill. The battle raged for 2 terrible hours. Clara lost track of how many times she fired, reloaded, fired again. When a warrior made it to the house wall, she shot him point blank through the window, feeling nothing in the moment but grim necessity. Then, as suddenly as it began, it ended. The surviving Apache melted back into the desert, leaving their dead behind. The defenders had held, though it cost 6 wounded, 2 critically. Clara immediately shifted from defender to healer, using everything Thorne had taught her about battlefield medicine. She extracted an arrow from Henderson's shoulder, stitched a terrible gash in Fuller's scalp, and held the hand of a young vaquero as he died, whispering prayers in Spanish. "The military's coming," someone called as dust clouds appeared on the horizon. But it was too late for pursuit, too late for anything but aftermath. That night, as the fort garrison helped bury the dead defender and attacker alike, Clara found herself sitting with Samuel in the nursery, rocking him despite his sleepy protests. The violence of the day seemed impossibly at odds with his innocent trust. "You saved lives today," Thorne said from the doorway. His shirt was blood-stained, his face etched with exhaustion, but his eyes held only admiration. "Henderson would have died without your quick work and the way you held that window." "I did what was necessary." Clara studied their son's peaceful face. "But I hope he never has to. I hope by the time Samuel's grown, this territory will have found better ways." "It will," Thorne said with quiet conviction, "because we're building them. Schools, hospitals, laws that work, communities that stand together. Sam, my brother Sam, he'd say civilization isn't about erasing violence, but creating alternatives to it." Clara looked up at him. "Do you think we're succeeding?" "Look around." Thorne gestured toward the window where lanterns marked the homes of neighbors standing vigil. 2 years ago, these people would have faced this alone, each ranch an isolated target. Today, we stood together. Apache, outlaws, corrupt politicians, they can't break what we've built. He was right, Clara realized. The frontier hadn't tamed them. They'd found a way to live with its wildness while nurturing something gentler. The schoolhouse stood intact. The wells flowed clear. Children of a dozen backgrounds learned side by side. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever was, but it was good. In the weeks that followed, the territory did change. The Apache raid proved to be one of the last in the region. Treaties were negotiated, reservations established, not ideal solutions, but steps toward coexistence. The railroad reached Dry Willow, bringing new settlers but also new opportunities. The hospital Father Miguel had mentioned became reality, with Clara organizing its nursing staff. And through it all, Clara kept teaching. Her students now included not just children, but adults eager to learn reading and figuring. The schoolhouse became the unofficial community center, hosting everything from wedding dances to town meetings. On a crisp December morning, as snow dusted the desert mountains, Clara sat at her desk writing in her journal. It had become her ritual, these letters to the future, to Samuel, to the daughter growing within her, to generations yet unborn. "My dear ones," she wrote, "I came to this land running from a lie, only to discover that truth isn't found, it's built, one honest moment at a time. Your father showed me that strength isn't about standing alone, but about knowing when to stand together. This community taught me that civilization isn't imposed from without, but grown from within. The West they write about in Eastern newspapers, all violence and wildness exists. But it's only part of the story. The rest is neighbors helping with harvest, children of all colors learning together, water shared fairly because we demanded it be so. It's your father reading law books by lamplight to argue justice in territorial courts. It's Jake Sullivan teaching you to ride before you could properly walk. It's Father Miguel blessing unions between people others might divide. You'll face your own challenges. This land demands much from those who would call it home. But remember this, we didn't conquer the frontier. We learned to live with it, to find beauty in its harshness, to build gentleness without destroying strength. When I left Boston, I thought I was leaving civilization behind. Instead, I found a truer version of it, one based not on appearances, but on actions. Not on birthright, but on character. Your heritage isn't just the ranch or the water rights. It's the knowledge that communities can choose justice, that love can bloom in unlikely soil, that sometimes the greatest courage is simply staying when everything urges you to run. The lamp still burns on our porch each night, a promise that travelers will find welcome. That darkness never has the final word. Keep it lit, my loves, for yourselves, for your children. For all who seek what we found a place where truth matters more than pretense, where tomorrow is always worth fighting for. Clara set down her pen as Samuel toddled in, clutching a wooden horse Jake had carved. Soon, Thorne would return from the legislature. Full of news about water management bills and school funding, Rosa would arrive to help plan next week's lessons. The ordinary business of life would continue. But for now, Clara simply gathered her son close, one hand on her growing belly, and looked out the window at the land that had tested and transformed them all. The cottonwood by the well stood tall against the winter sky, its bare branches reaching toward spring's inevitable return. Like everything in this harsh and honest country, it endured by bending without breaking, by putting down roots too deep for any storm to dislodge. And that, Clara thought as Samuel showed her his toy with babbling enthusiasm, was perhaps the greatest lesson the frontier could teach. That love, like water in the desert, was precious precisely because it was hard-won. That truth, like the North Star, could guide you home even through the darkest night. The lamp would burn on the Maddox porch tonight, as it had every night since their wedding. A small light against vast darkness, perhaps, but sufficient. Always sufficient, as long as there were those willing to tend it. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale. Are you listening at home, during your commute, or perhaps before bed? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And let's connect over our shared love of these frontier stories. If you enjoyed this journey through the Old West, please subscribe to Wild West Night, like this video, and hit that hype button to help more people discover these tales of courage, love, and redemption under the western stars.